kick us off and just welcome everybody to our November Network Cafe. This is Regional Planning Commission's 101 and Why You Should Care. And it's part of our 2024-2025 Network Cafe series. My name is Colleen Jennings, and I'm the Communications Coordinator for the New Hampshire Food Alliance. So we're going to start, as I like to do always, with introductions. Please introduce yourself in the chat, share your name, your pronouns, and the organization that you represent. And then, as I said, our agenda will be kind of circulating in the chat there for you to review as I introduce to you a little bit about the New Hampshire Food Alliance. So Sylvia, you can go to the next slide. So the New Hampshire Food Alliance is a network of over 200 organizations, businesses, communities, and we're all dedicated to growing a thriving, fair, and sustainable local food system here in the Granite State. So the New Hampshire Food Alliance organizes all those organizations, and together we're building relationships with each other, learning from one another, and collaborating to advance common goals. We respond creatively to challenges and amplify our collective impact all together. So all those organizations that you see on the screen and many more, we're working together to really achieve a thriving, fair, sustainable local food system here in New Hampshire. So one of the ways we do that work is by hosting our Network Cafe series. So you can go to the next slide. And we host our Network Cafe series on the first Friday of every month, September through April. And we bring our network together to learn and discuss critical topics and issues that are facing our food system right now. They're designed to be inclusive opportunities for everyone to learn and grow in our food systems work. And you can learn a little bit more about what to expect during our network cafes, what we expect of you, and what you can expect from us during this time by reading our working agreements. That is linked in the agenda. And that will give you kind of a good idea of where we're headed today. But before we do that, I do always want to acknowledge our work as a part of the University of New Hampshire. So we are a community outreach program of the University of New Hampshire Sustainability Institute. And as a part of that, as a part of UNH, we share the university's dedication to diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. We believe those 4 tenets are foundational to achieving our core educational mission as a program and embracing the many characteristics of our community members, our network partners, and that makes them all uniquely themselves. So with that in mind, we believe it's very important, especially during gatherings like this, to continually acknowledge the hardships the Indigenous communities in our region have faced, as well as the positive impact they have in our community. So I will do so now by sharing an excerpt from the UNH Land, Water, and Life Acknowledgement. We can go to the next slide, please. As we all journey on the trail of life, we wish to acknowledge the spiritual and physical connection the Pennacook, Abenaki, and Wabanaki peoples have maintained to Indakina homeland, which the University of New Hampshire community is honored to steward today. We also acknowledge the hardships they continue to endure after the loss of unceded homelands and champion our responsibility to foster relationships and opportunities that strengthen the well-being of the Indigenous people who carry forward the tradition of their ancestors. Thank you all for joining me in that acknowledgement. I'm going to turn to today's topic, which is regional planning commissions. We have Todd Horner here from the Southwest Region Planning Commission and Sylvia von Aulock from the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. Both of them are the executive directors of their regional planning commissions, respectively. And our goal today is to really hear from them, understand their work, and kind of see where the intersections of their work is and our work kind of lie, and let you guys ask some questions and think about how we can work with Sylvia and Todd and the regional planning commissions in your areas to do more together. That's what our goal is always at the Food Alliance, is doing more together, doing it better. So that is what we're going to hopefully achieve today. Before I pass it off to Sylvia, we're going to do a quick poll. So I'm going to launch that now and I want to give Sylvia and Todd a good idea of who's in the room. So you will see a question pop up just asking you to try to select one. I know it's hard, of the issues, focus areas, issues of the food system that you represent in your work or that you work on most of the time. So we'll give everybody a few minutes to do that. and then we'll share the results. Okay, seeing a lot of food access and nutrition security. Love to see it. Okay, great. All right, so we'll end the poll, or we'll get a few more answers in there. All right, we'll end the poll because we got to get going. All right, so we'll share the results. Looks like a lot of folks from food access and nutrition security, some folks food production, distribution, sale. That's great. Really cool. A nice spread of people. Awesome. All right, well, thank you for doing that. And then Sylvia, take it away.
Okay, excitement. Well, so thanks so much for having me here and having Todd. We love talking about us, about regional planning commissions. Just to give you an idea, I honestly had no idea about the New Hampshire Food Alliance, and it was our commissioners who were interested in food network systems and how climate change is impacting them that got me to reach out to the Food Alliance. And so that's how this relationship has started. And I'm thrilled to be here to chat a little bit. This is somewhat of a dry topic, and I'm sorry about that, but the ABCs of RPCs may shock you that not everybody knows about regional planning commissions. So I will try to make this as energetic as possible. And it's a lot of words, and I do apologize that, but it's important to have that foundation. So why were regional planning commissions formed? So back in 1969, I was 9 years old, so now I've outed myself. The governor at the time decided what you're seeing here, a well-defined regional planning program will supply the various communities with the help they require in planning for present and future needs of New Hampshire residents, aiding in the growth, development, and prosperity expected for the years ahead. So that has been kind of our foundation of how we have started. And so that Governor King in 1969, he formed a committee, and they really wanted to look at, well, they had a variety of things they recognized. And at that time in 1969, and I'm not sure if anyone else besides me was even alive then, but at the time, some of huge federal programs were available to communities, and that included HUD and transit, big transit programs. So they were really large federal programs. So they wanted to ensure, this governor's committee wanted to ensure that municipal coordination and accessibility to federal grants was available. And they thought at the time that state government wasn't able to do it and local government wasn't able to do it. So they wanted to form regional planning commissions. Right, simultaneously, they looked at resource economists from UNH, and they said, hey, look, we need you to study New Hampshire and figure out where are there important groupings. So they looked at tourism, and they looked at shared functions, and like, how do these different communities relate? And initially there were 17 different groupings, and then that was narrowed down to 9. And I sort of equate it to the 9 from the Lord of the Rings. This was the funny part, so that if anyone has already been sleeping, you are now waking up. But so I equate it to the 9 here. And so we have 9 regional planning commissions across the state. And looking at the map, we have North Country Council. Over to the left in the green is Upper Valley. We have the Lakes region in the middle. We have Stratford Regional Planning Commission. In the center is central New Hampshire. Todd's area is down to the left, southwest. I'm the bluish color in the middle. That's Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. At the seacoast is Rockingham, and then we have Nashua Regional Planning Commission. But they're not just symbols, they're people. And so like some of Todd's folks, and these are some of our staff, and we're out assisting communities and agencies all the time. So what are our duties? Back again in 69 and 70, when this was all developing, they came up with the RSA 36, and that's kind of where we have our fundamental rules and regs and are the foundation of what we do. And the first thing was that we provide advisory technical assistance to local planning groups. And we have no jurisdiction, like we can't tell any community what to do. We only serve them. And so, for example, Todd, how many, you have to pop on, Todd. How many communities are you serving right now?
We have 33 towns.
33
serving.
towns. Every single regional planning commission is a little different. We have 14 communities, although I'm going to guess that even though we may have one of the fewest communities, we probably have the most population because we have Manchester at its center. But though our municipalities, they ask for advice on all kinds of issues, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But again, we have no regulatory jurisdiction. And it doesn't matter if you're a very organized planning board like this one in Londonderry or a smaller planning board in Ware. We represent all of them. Some of the powers and duties include, for example, we prepare a comprehensive regional master plan. If any of you have been involved in a local community master plan, this is similar, only it's for the entire region. And for us and for all the regional planning commissions, it must have those issues that are listed there. It must cover land use topics, transportation, communications, and so on. And we're in the process, all the regional planning commissions are in the process of updating that right now. Another thing that we are required to do by our RSA is we do a regional housing needs assessment every year, and we update that every 5 years. And that can get very controversial because we have in every community people who want to build a moat around their town and have no growth. And we have people who are recognizing, hey, my young adult children can't find a place to live. They can't find a home. They can't find an apartment. There's no choices. So there are people on both sides of that coin who are screaming about housing. We also have, we form committees, and we are part of a variety of committees. Often they can be with Maine and Massachusetts. We are part of it's called MAPC. So many acronyms, so little time. But it's part of the greater Boston area, and they are working on sustainability issues. So we work on that with them. We are on several state boards and commissions, including transportation councils, state coordinating council for transportation, but also I work with one on sustainable housing and things like that. Let's see. Oh, how we are governed. So, and sort of our structure. So it's often people ask, well, what happened to county governments in New Hampshire? Because, like, for example, I worked for a long time in Washington State. I come from New Jersey, and they're very strong county governments. And we do have some amount of county government, but not like in other states. And for the regional planning commissions, it might have made sense at some point to make us part of that, but we're not. We are subdivisions, political subdivisions of the state. And so we're not state agencies, we're not nonprofits, we're not corporations, we don't lobby. And we are governed, every single one of our communities has commissioners. They are appointed by the municipality, and they actually govern the regional planning commissions. We have no power to tax. We are financially supported by membership dues, which are voluntarily paid. All our other funding comes from contracts, from grants we go after, things like that. So we're like a big city, but we don't have any power to tax. So I remember there are 9 of us. 4 of our organizations are also metropolitan planning organizations. And I'm going to make this a little smaller so I can see. And those are Nashua, Rockingham, Southern, and Stratford. And an MPO is really all about dealing with funding from federal transportation. And we develop and maintain transportation improvement programs. Also, we do a lot of work under this. All the other 5, which we call the rurals, and they also have contracts, but they are not considered a metropolitan planning organization. And I didn't finish that sentence. They have contracts with New Hampshire Department of Transportation. So what are some of the services we provide? Sorry again for all the words, but I didn't want to forget them. Remember that some of the duties are from our RSAs are very broad, with assistance to our communities, and it can be on literally anything. But here are some of the top ones: transportation infrastructure guidance, and that can be anything from bridge repair or replacement, intersection improvements, roadway improvements, bringing sidewalks in, trails, all kinds of things, anything to do with transportation. Traffic, bike, and pedestrian counting, transit service coordination, housing needs assessment. I had mentioned that earlier. We do a lot of GIS mapping and analysis. I had mentioned we assist planning boards. We also assist conservation commissions and zoning boards, historic district commissions. We do assistance with master plan updates. So that's for every single community, because every community is required to have a master plan. So we assist with those. Assistance with updating local regulations. Age-friendly community planning. That is all about making sure that a community is accessible for anyone, regardless of age and ability. We do a lot of climate change work and sustainability planning, impact fee development, hazard mitigation work, capital improvement program development, economic development assistance, brownfields assessment, public engagement and facilitation, grant application, and if your head isn't already spinning, watershed and water resource planning. But how does that actually relate to what you all are doing and with food services? So housing, I've talked a lot about housing now. You all, in the work you do, may have realized for a long time now that whether it's your own staff that you work with, or colleagues, or the food network groups that you work with, they're having issues with staffing because people can't find places to live. So that's one way. Economic development and food network business recognition. Making sure that the food industries, the local ones for New Hampshire, are successful. So that's economic development. Transportation and freight. So that has to do with the delivery of goods. Climate change. That's how I mentioned when I started that we got involved with the New Hampshire Food Alliance because of the sustainability issue and ensuring or understanding the impacts of climate change to New Hampshire's food network and how we might assist there. Water resource protection, that sort of goes without saying, that is important to everyone, but definitely critical for those in the food network business. Community land use policies, I'm doing some work in that right now, and ensuring that there are, a lot of innovative and sort of fluid allowances for agricultural uses. Right now, for example, I want to propose for Londonderry that any of the farms have very liberal housing allowances so that they can build more than one home on the land, so that they can have housing for staff, even if it's seasonal staff, all kinds of sort of allowances there. And then grant application assistance, because I'm going to guess everybody could use some funding. So some possible regional planning commission services for tomorrow. So we could be assisting farmers with agritourism, urban food co-ops, climate change challenges, creating innovative zoning allowances for sustainable farming, such as agricultural overlay districts, supporting farming and food system businesses for stakeholder groups to ensure that they have a place at the table. Allowances for smaller, energy efficient, climate resilient homes, and water, air, and soil protection. So that's enough for me. Let's hear from Todd.
Thanks, Sylvia. And thanks to New Hampshire Food Alliance for hosting both of us today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a few specific examples of how RPCs and their work intersects with the food system. But before I do that, as Sylvia was speaking, I was reminded of one of the best articulations that I've read of the value of regional planning, and it comes from the Smart Growth Manual. And that might be blurred out. I'm seeing that it's blurred out, but it's the Smart Growth Manual by Andre Dewani, Jeff Speck, and Mike Leiden, who are all heavy hitters in the planning world. They come as close to celebrity status as you can get as a planner, and they lay out a bunch of different issues and action items that relate to this concept of smart growth, of targeting development in a way that isn't encouraging sprawl and developing farmland and other sensitive natural areas. And I think it just makes sense to read it to you real quick, because it's just a few sentences. And they write that regional planning is essential, for it alone operates at the true scale of people's lives. Planning a single town or city is not enough, because working, shopping, recreation, education, and other daily activities routinely take people across municipal lines. Without regional scale determinants such as natural corridors, transit systems, and designated urban centers, even the best local planning may contribute to sprawl. So that concept and that articulation really resonates to me. It resonates with me. I think it's really true. Most of us are, or many of us are commuting across town lines to reach our jobs. We know rivers don't start and end at municipal boundaries. We know our food networks and food systems don't, they aren't contained within any given community. So I think RPCs and the state of New Hampshire are really one of the only and best vehicles for facilitating planning and coordination at the regional scale. And so many of the issues that touch on our daily lives operate at that scale, including food. So I thought I'd just throw that in there, even though it was deviating from my script. I was inspired by Sylvia's remarks, just to throw that in. So just to give you a little background on myself, so I spent my 20s operating a organic farm in Peterborough, New Hampshire. This is me frolicking with pigs in what now seems like simpler times. But I think it makes, I thought I would start with my personal experience because my farming career was really made possible by reform at the local level, as far as zoning and land use regulations are concerned. So um, when I was farming, I leased land at a co-housing community and a couple other locations, but the co-housing community, which is called New Benusant Neighborhood and Farm and is pictured here, was my primary site that I farmed out of, and the concept was essentially, instead of developing a typical subdivision, large homes each on their own 2-acre lot, what if we clustered those homes into a more compact arrangement and preserve the farmland and forest land located elsewhere on the site? So the community has 29 housing units, a mix of single family and duplexes, and a couple of quads, one of which I lived in when I was farming there. Um, and like I said, they made the farmland available to me as a farmer to run a independent operation as a small business. And in the planning lingo, this is known as a cluster subdivision or cluster housing, this type of development pattern. And this would not have been possible had not the town of Peterborough enacted subdivision regulations that allowed for this to occur. This is not the default setting, so to speak, in most communities. Most communities, uh, when a developer wants to subdivide a property, essentially the local regs say your minimum lot size needs to be, X square feet or Y acres, and that tends to lead to more sprawling development pattern. Some communities in the state, and it seems like this is increasingly the case, makes cluster subdivision an option that developers can use, and even incentivizes this type of development by saying, hey, if you cluster your homes in a more compact arrangement, we'll throw in a density bonus. So, if you develop using the um, the typical subdivision regs, then you could only fit 10 units on this site. But if you cluster them and preserve farmland or open space, maybe you can develop 15 acres. So there's an incentive to do that in some communities. Um, and the connection with regional planning commissions is that we are often looked to as a resource to help local communities think through regulatory reform of this kind. In fact, just the other day, I was approached by another community in our service area to look at this very issue of cluster subdivision. They recognize that they have a housing shortage, but they also want to preserve aspects of their rural community that are important to them, including open space and farmlands. So um, they were interested in what cluster subdivisions could do in helping them achieve that balancing act. So just one example that, frankly, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to run a farm had that development not been in place, and had that regulatory reform not occurred beforehand. So I guess I can move, Sylvia, if you could advance to the next slide. I'm just going to mention a few other specific examples. So taking a step back from zoning and regulatory reform, um, and Sylvia touched on this as something RPCs do, which is working with communities on comprehensive plans or master plans, which are really intended to serve as the guiding document for communities as they decide how to adopt or amend their local land use regulations, everything from zoning to subdivision regulations to site plan regulations that, there's a whole host of different regulatory documents that exist at the local level. And um, the master plan is really an opportunity to discuss as a community at a higher level, what do we want our community to look like in the future? It's a good opportunity for residents and other communities to take stock of how have things changed in recent years, and where do we stand today on the issues that are important to us, things like housing and natural resource preservation and economic development, and some of the other topics that Sylvia discussed earlier. In one way that we here at Southwest integrate considerations of food and farming into the master planning process is we typically work with towns to map their prime agricultural soils and make sure that those are recognized within the master plan, so that as they are deciding, where should we target future growth, they at least have that information at their fingertips as to where their prime agricultural soils are located. Um, so it's something that it's just a good opportunity. If you don't have that mapped out, communities might not think about how targeting residential or commercial growth could affect sensitive and valuable agricultural resources. So that's just one specific example of how we work with towns to preserve their farmland. Next slide, please. And another specific example that I wanted to talk with you about is a project that's currently underway at Southwest, which is development of a regional food system assessment. And this is actually how Nicole and I first connected. We were just embarking on this process, and I saw all the great work coming out of New Hampshire Food Alliance and New England Feeding New England. And how I would characterize our project is kind of a mini version of that more ambitious work, where we're just trying to bring together food system stakeholders in the region to take stock of where we are, as far as the health of our food system, from farm viability to farmland preservation to food access, marketing, distribution, all the different links in the food system cycle, and to strategize as a group to think about how do we grow more local food in the region? How do we eat more local food in the region? There are plenty of really great groups in the Monadnock region that are working on this issue, from the Conservation District to the Monadnock Farm and Community Coalition to the Monadnock Food Co-op. And we certainly at the Planning Commission, don't want to pretend to have their expertise and to duplicate the work that they're doing. But one value add that regional planning commissions can often bring to the table is to facilitate information exchange between different groups, whether those groups are different towns or different stakeholders within a certain subject matter area, and to distill that information and to document it, so that folks are avoiding duplicating one another's work. We're opening up new opportunities for collaboration across groups that might not be communicating as much as they could. And this particular picture here is from a focus group, one of the focus groups that we've held as part of this project, bringing folks to the literal table to talk through different food system issues. This particular focus group concentrated on food waste diversion and composting. And we had heard of great work happening in different organizations, but there really hadn't been a meeting of the minds to, you know, really strategize in a more coordinated way. You know, how do we divert more food waste in the Monadnock region? What are the gaps that are preventing us from composting more than we are today? And we also invited New Hampshire DES staff to talk about the food waste ban that is going to go into effect in February of next year, which is, I think, also emblematic of something RPCs often do, which is provide a communication channel between local folks working in local communities and state level agencies, statewide organizations, so that we're hopefully avoiding a situation where we're just reinventing the wheel and aren't as plugged in as we could be with work happening at the state level. And since I saw quite a few participants today are coming from the food access and nutrition arena, I'll just mention that a couple years ago, our agency worked with the shoot, I'm blanking. I just had the name. I was going to drop the link of the report. We worked with the Monadnock Children's Food Access Alliance to develop a region food access analysis, which this project in many ways is similar to the current food system assessment, but the distinction I would make is that the food access analysis is really focused on the consumer side of the equation, whereas our current project is incorporating consideration on the production side of the equation. So just another example of planning commissions bringing together folks who might be coordinating to a certain extent, but just need that staff capacity, that organizational structure to plan together as far as how to best leverage their resources and what gaps might exist, and you know, how to move projects forward in a way that's aligned with one another, as opposed to working at cross purposes or in a vacuum. So I'll drop a link to that food access analysis, because some of you might be interested in taking a look. So I think that's what I wanted to cover. I'm happy to answer questions or get into more detail on some of the things either myself or Sylvia mentioned. But you know, it's as someone who's coming from a career in farming in the food sector. You know, I'm spending less time in a tractor these days as a regional planner, but the two worlds are very much they very much overlap. They're really, you know, the food system work that I did in my 20s was all about how do we steward our farmland in community. And now today I'm thinking about very similar issues, but more on a more regional scale, and in you know, focusing more on policy as opposed to the you know, on the ground agricultural considerations. So I think I'll leave it there.
Thanks so much. Thank you both. I heard a lot of connections to our work here in the food system and our network and kind of how we work together. So I think we were right on, Nicole, booking our guests here today. I think we have a lot in common. We're definitely going to do some questions. Sylvia and Todd wanted to do another quick poll before we jump into that. And we also have a discussion question for you to kind of get you thinking about what you just learned. So poll coming at you now. Take a few minutes to answer those two questions, and then we'll kind of dive into some Q&A and discussion.
Wow, this is tough. They have to pick one of those organizations.
Yeah. Yes, I know. It's a kind of a little bit of a pigeonhole, but
You pick your favorite one.
yeah.
And thank you both. That was really interesting, and informative.
It was. Agreed. Okay. Seeing some good
And
answers coming in.
maybe, Colleen, if people don't see something that is on the list, they might add it to the chat so we can see
Absolutely.
what their number one issue is.
Yeah, great. Yes, definitely do that. If there's not something there that you don't feel you're represented, please add it in the chat as well as other questions. Okay, let's give everybody a few more seconds to do that. While we're waiting for some poll answers, Lisa had two, I think, pretty good questions that I think, Todd, you touched on a little bit with your presentation, talking about how regional planning commissions can be involved with food waste management and composting. I don't know, I feel like you maybe did a good job of answering that, but maybe from a higher up level, like in general, what kind of advocacy could we be doing on our end that would help a regional planning commission take on an issue like that? Either one of you can answer also.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, right now, our intersection with that topic has really been just centered on information, sharing information from DES regarding the food waste ban that is going to, like I said, go into effect in February. And to help our local stakeholders understand how that could help build the market for a commercial composting operation in our area, and also might it underscores the need for a commercial composting facility. We currently don't have a commercial composting facility in Keene or Peterborough or the surrounding area. The one private sector composting operation currently needs to truck all of their compostable waste to Brattleboro, Vermont. So yeah, as far as managing waste diversion program or food waste diversion program, I know I saw the note about Lakes Region maybe having a more active role in that at some point, and I know that regional planning commissions in other states can sometimes play a more active role in actually managing solid waste programs and services. That's Sylvia, maybe you know better than me. I don't think any RPC in New Hampshire currently plays an active role on that front. So in short, we're we're focusing on information exchange and incorporating composting and nutrient cycling into our food system assessment.
Just to be clear, we're addressing Alex's question.
No,
was
we
it
were
a-
talking
Oh,
about
no.
Lisa's question.
Yep, Lisa's question specifically about addressing food waste issues and composting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we actually invited Fox. Does everybody know Fox in Maine?
Mr. Fox, yep.
Mr. Fox.
Mhm.
We invited him to our annual meeting last year. And I'm not an expert in this at all. I don't understand the issues. I think Todd's much closer to that, so. But I live in
What would help
Newmarket.
you-
We have the allowance in Newmarket to because Mr. Fox brings all of the waste in the Seacoast region, the food waste, to Maine. And so he's able to do it that way. And it's an issue.
There's another question from Lisa here, if I could add it in.
Yeah.
What is the resource you're using for mapping of farmland? Question goes to what mapping do planning commissions use for planning as opposed to what planning boards and towns are asking developers to use? And Lisa, feel free to voice it differently if you'd like. But the initial question was what's the resource for mapping of farmland?
Yeah, so the underlying data that we typically rely on is from the Web Soil Survey from USGS. And we've actually packaged that data into a web map, and I can share that if that's of interest. Typically, planning boards and towns are not asking developers to identify prime ag soil in their plans. I've never seen that, I guess a town could um, include that in their site plan review regulations as something they'd want to see represented on a development proposal. It's something it might be a good idea. I've just never heard of a town deciding to do that though.
Colleen, can I just jump in quick?
Yeah,
quick
sure. Go
comment
ahead.
on it? Yeah, so yeah, the Web Soil Survey comes from the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the Web Soil Survey does provide a farmland layer when you go to the Web Soil Survey. I'm just going to mention that.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's hit Alex's question, then Peter, I see your hand raised. So we'll get to you after Alex's. Alex wrote, how do your commissions and networks work through efforts that are advancing competing land use needs? Additionally, what voices or priorities come to the table, and how are different needs folded into thinking through how land is allocated to agriculture, renewable energy, housing, roads, etc.?
That's a
The big one.
It's a big one, and so I'll use one of our communities there. We're helping with their master plan update. So in a survey that went out to all residents and was available to all residents, we had 1,400 people respond, which is a pretty good number. And in within that group, I have people that, like I mentioned before, they want to put a stop to growth. They want no growth. They accuse us of being liberals. They really do not want anything to do with growth. And then at the same hand, like I mentioned earlier, we have people who are also very much interested in having more diverse housing available, having affordable housing, and so there's everything in between. So those are the types of voices. They can be extreme and they can be right in the middle of that. And the priorities vary and it usually is all about community values. And one thing that came out in that survey is the value of their agriculture and their farms in that community. They have several apple orchards that it's a huge thing for that town. They are all about their apple orchards. And so it'll be interesting in negotiating and sort of guiding this discussion amongst the community residents who have been vocal on how we work through these pretty big issues. But one of the things I had thought of doing, sort of going down this a little bit, was to interview the farmers in the community, since they are so beloved, and to see what the needs are and concerns are of those specific farms, so that it can be reflected in the master plan. And maybe if the farmers are having issues with regulations, for example, with housing, with, it could be anything, that they are addressed in that master plan.
Excellent. Thank you. That's a great response to Alex's question. Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick note on going back to the composting question. Up until, I believe, 2022, the DES regulations were very obstructive to any sort of commercial composting, because they excluded anything from a meat or dairy source, which basically wiped out a whole lot of food source compost. We had done a bill in 2015 to change that, but they didn't get the regulations done until 2022. And so it's a very rapid shift from that to now the demand that we increase, that food waste at an industrial scale get composted. The hope with that industrial food waste ban was to encourage composting facilities, so eventually we'll have more in the state, so that will develop. But I think that that some of the people in the private sector might still be a little bit leery of what of their previous inability to do that in the state. So anything that the planning commissions can do to encourage people to get into that field would be great.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that feedback, Peter. I don't know if Todd or Sylvia have any responses, but definitely want to get to some more questions. Eric, I see your question in the chat, and I'm going to respond in there, and I might ask Todd or Sylvia to respond to as well about your question about contact lists. But Stephanie, I think, has a really great question about agritourism. How are you assisting towns, planning boards with agritourism guidance, as many farms or producers need this market channel to survive? Either one of you can jump in.
I have not to date, and it's the first time this has come up in my region, although I may be a little bit more urban because of Manchester, but we still have several large farming areas in our region, and it just has come up. So give me a year and then I'll answer your question. We'll see.
Todd, do you have any experience with that?
So I mean, when I was farming in Peterborough, the town adopted an agritourism ordinance, but we haven't contracted with the town yet up until this point to help them develop or amend an agritourism ordinance. One way that our work has intersected with that issue is with short-term rentals and glamping. Those are income streams that I know quite a few farmers in our region rely on in order to pay the bills. So striking a balancing act between, making sure towns aren't vulnerable to investment property owner snatching up land or housing and turning it into Airbnbs when there's already a housing shortage, while at the same time giving farmers the latitude and the option to rent out a room and or have a glamping set up on farm to generate revenue to support the food production piece of their operation. So that's one initial thought that comes to mind. It is tricky though. There have been instances of communities in our region seeing more residents move in from other parts of New England, more urban areas, and having a certain vision of what farming looks like, and maybe haven't thought too much about what farming can smell like, and that causing conflicts. So quite a few of our towns have adopted right to farm ordinances that underscored the state statute on the matter. So those are just some initial thoughts that come to mind.
I just got back from the Northern New England chapter of American Planners Association in Vermont. So that usually includes people from Vermont, Maine, and New Hampshire, and a smattering from Massachusetts. But I heard from Vermont farmers, and they, I think, are fairly well organized, as is Maine. And some of the farmers there, it may not surprise this group, they're utilizing their farms for wedding venues, restaurants, for housing, for short-term stays for people who are interested in farming. So they come for dinner and an overnight and that kind of thing. And so I think we can, as regional planning commissions, assist our communities in sort of making sure that land use regulations provide these kind of allowances. And certainly the state has, I think, done a lot. I saw Noah was on the call, but I think the state has done quite a bit with agro-tourism, and hopefully this will be a lot easier as we, realize how important our food
Mhm.
network systems are.
Yeah, I think the way that agritourism often comes up in discussion within the zoning arena is, what uses to allow as accessory uses to farming. So if you're operating a farm, the zoning might give you more flexibility as far as setting up a retail establishment on site, as long as it is quote unquote accessory to the farming operation, which is the primary use. It gets a little bit dicey though, figuring out when something evolves from being, an accessory use to really the primary use. At what point does the farm with the wedding venue become a wedding venue with a farm? And that it's a blurry line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I see a lot of chatter in the chat about that. I think that's something that comes up a lot in our work, kind of working within a town or municipality, working within those regulations. So glad to have both you and Sylvia on our side on that one and helping us work through those complex issues. I think we may have time for one more quick question. I saw Noah pop on his camera. I don't know if he had something he wanted to share. He's been the master of the strategic plan stuff on this topic. So please, by all means, Noah, if you have something to share.
Well, I just can't resist but say thank you to all of you for being here. And I've just learned over the last few months and in the last hour so much from you about regional planning commissions, about local land use regulations, about all the intersectionality with the work that the rest of our network is doing, and which was the impetus for this Network Cafe. And you just Sylvia started this Network Cafe by saying it can be dry, or those slides are dry. I didn't think they were. And I think you do a great job with the complicated topic. So thank you. And Noah, sorry, I'll let you speak.
No, more just wanted to recognize that I'm listening. Thanks. Everybody, I did want to put in a plug. I think Nicole put it earlier that the land use planning brief related to this very topic, in which a lot of the same themes were identified, is open for public comment for another week. So I really encourage folks to check that out. I'm going to put a link in about agritourism for folks that want more of a background. NHMA attorney Steve Buckley from NHMA wrote an article last year, kind of from the statute perspective, kind of where that line is, as Todd did a great job kind of illuminating. And the last thing I'll say is, I think this is great. I think that one of the things we identified in the brief, and I'm hoping to kind of hopefully do more of in my role here at OPD, is seeing if there's opportunities to kind of bring housing folks and farming folks kind of together more and identify that common ground of how can we kind of find those solutions that can work jointly and kind of identify, as I think Todd and Sylvia did a great job today, of kind of those replicable kind of solutions across the state that we can highlight more.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I just want to underscore that thought, Noah, of bringing farm and conservation folks and housing folks to the same table. I think we would discover that there's plenty to collaborate on, and there may be mutual interest in working together to advance those different causes together.
Awesome. I think that's a great place to end, because it sounds like we have a lot of collaboration to do and meetings to have and things to schedule. So that is great. Thank you, Sylvia and Todd, so much again for being here. I'm going to add our Network Cafe evaluation to the chat. Please take that if you would like to. I'm also going to plug our next two Network Cafes, which are the next one in December is about seafood supply chain, so taking us in a totally different but really exciting direction. And then our January Network Cafe is going to be our agricultural policy forum, so definitely mark your calendars for that on January 3rd. But thank you again, everyone, for being here, and enjoy the weekend. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Happy November.